Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Winslow, and that is Carlos with the Creative Hole.
What's up?
How's everyone doing? Hopefully, everybody's doing good. Um, so, today we are going to be going over the book Courage is Calling, Fortune Favors the Brave by Ryan Holiday. This is actually episode 5. Last week, we kind of dove into a little bit of our faith, which is Christianity, and the how you can use it in a practical way. So this week we are going to continue with the book Courage is Calling by Ryan Holiday. So what's up, Carlos?
Oh, not much, man. Just pretty excited. Got me a nifty
I saw that.
new hat right there. Bammer, right?
Okay,
So
that's good
thought I'd
stuff.
rock it for the show, representing,
Dang, you're repping, huh? I like the
repping,
repping.
repping the creative whole hood.
Mm-hmm.
No, I had a good day today, man. Just went out shooting earlier, uh, with one of our friends that we both know,
Okay.
and and shot off some bullets and all that good stuff, and learned a different technique to improve my aim. So that was cool.
Having
Um,
good aim is good.
yeah, ate a fat burrito. Then went over to the
The one at
Monday
the store,
sale, huh?
the one in Lemoore.
Yeah, yeah. Then after that, went over to the Monday sale with my wife and went to go check out my son. He started. Uh, he opened up. He's a vendor out there now with him and his girl. So went to go check them out, go support them, and he needs a plug. He needs a credit plug to help him get set up better. So I told him I'd help him out. So you just gotta break me off. Just give me my I'm a taxi like Debo. Nah, I'm just
Dang, 20%.
well, treat it like the Lord, 10%, 10%.
Oh, a little somewhat tithing
Yeah.
off the top.
So yeah, I did that. Then went out and there's this restaurant. It's pretty bomb. When me and my wife went and ate there.
Oh, I saw that.
Yes.
Would you have
Yes.
molcajete? That's what it looked
Yep.
like.
Yeah, molcajete.
Nice.
Red. Molcajete red.
My fault, not the green one.
Yeah.
Sorry.
That's
So,
next.
so one thing that I want to reiterate would be who this book or what this, no, I guess who it's for. So it's people that want to be motivated and inspired, and on personal development is really big
For
with,
scaredy cats.
for yeah, for scaredy cats. So that's like a big thing on who this book, Courage is Calling, would be for: motivation, inspiration, and personal development. So to start us off, so the whole Courage is Calling. So I guess at the very beginning, it pretty much posed this question, which was, what is it that stops us from being courageous? What's the one thing that makes cowards out of all of us? Or you can say scaredy cats. And what they say, or what Ryan Holiday states in this book, is that it is fear. So fears are often defined as strong feelings of anxiety or dread in response to a perceived danger or threat. So, you know what? I'm going to go to the next one. So, fear is a natural and important part of human experiences and can serve as a protective mechanism to help us avoid harm or damage. So, going into a perceived threat. So, one person might not see something as a perceived threat, but others may see it as a perceived threat. Um, the biggest thing that I could think of when it comes down to things like that would be somebody's idea of what scares them. So, like in a practical sense, it would be like, we'll say, I'll just bring up my son. So let's just say that he is scared to. Well, I saw this in a movie. So I'm gonna use this one. So let's say he's scared of swimming. So if I just like let him go and be like, all right, well, like swim, and he's kind of like, no, like I don't want to swim right now. Like I don't know how. I don't know how. I don't know how. But if I put everything on what I believe to be true, then I'm not doing the due diligence for my son. And I could be I don't know, in some strange way, be making it a lot harder for him to do whatever he needs to do. So,
Or traumatizing him.
yeah, well, I guess that was the word.
Depending how you introduce him to the water, right?
That was the word probably that I was looking for. But it always comes down to what they perceive as them being afraid of or being scared of or whatever the case may be. Um, because fears can be specific, such as fear of snakes or heights, or more general, such as fear of failure or public speaking, especially the one of heights. I'm afraid of heights. I've been called, well, he's 18 now, but I was called by my buddy's son a wimp because I didn't get on roller coasters, on like the big like roller coasters that take you super high and that drop you, because I just don't like heights. And so he called me a wimp. But I was okay with that, even though I was getting punked by like a 5-year-old, but it's fine. I'm okay with that. Snakes, I don't really like them. Um, so is there anything that you can think of at this moment?
I just think going back to it's the perception. It's very individual. The person who has a fear, like for example, there's a couple guys that I work with, and the warehouse that we're in is like it's like a haven for spiders, right? And so there's like spiders, like whole tribes of spiders, little spiders, right?
That's
And
super fun.
like they don't freak me out because they're not like black widows, like just these little baby spiders. So it's like whatever. I
You
just,
feel a little tough.
huh?
Said so you feel a little tough.
No, I don't feel tough. I'm just not tripping off them, right? But one of the guys that works in there, one of the mentors, he's absolutely like terrified of him. I mean, he will jump and run and like he doesn't like make no bones about it. Like he's terrified of spiders. And so like if you like, people act like they have something and they're gonna bring a spider close and like he flips out really bad. And then the other guy that's working with us, um, he will he will go pick. He doesn't believe in killing spiders, and so
Awesome.
he'll pick them up and take them outside, right? And so it's like two totally different mindsets, right? And it's all this, I guess, for the story that we tell ourselves. And it's crazy because even working inside of a prison institution, there's a lot of things that people would be afraid of. And for people who are in there and can face the fears of being inside of a prison all the time and all that entails, and yet you can handle that day in and day out, but a little spider freaks you out. You could be surrounded by murderers and very violent people, and yet it's the spider that trips you out.
And it's weird. Like, I mean, well, yeah, it's weird. Um, how you have one extreme of like being around like murderers and all this other stuff, and then you have this for him this other extreme of small spiders. Even though like you could just step on it or do whatever, but you're willing to take the path of least resistance and just I'm just gonna
Yeah,
run. Like I'm
yeah,
out. Whatever.
yeah.
Doesn't even matter to me.
Like the Road Runner, bro.
That's
He's
kind of
like
funny
beep
though.
beep.
But
Yeah,
but it definitely comes down to like the perceived idea of whatever the case may be. And that's what fear would be. Um, so many people have multiple fears, and it's normal to fear in certain situations. Fear can save your life, so it's not necessarily a bad thing all the time. So going back to the whole like fear of snakes, like it in a sense like it could save your life. Like what if there's like those little snakes that you find like in fields and stuff like that, which what they might bite, but they're not necessarily going to kill you. But if you see one in the mountain somewhere, you're like, oh well, it's just I've been bit by a snake before, and it's going to be whatever. So if you have that idea, like going into it, then all of a sudden, like another snake bites you, and you're like, ah, whatever. Like I've been bit by a snake before, and
yeah. I
then
I think it has a lot to do with your level of exposure, and it kind of like makes me think of like there's that type of therapy called exposure therapy, right, where it helps people
No.
face their fears. And so basically it exposes you to that thing, over and over again until you get comfortable around it, right? That's the whole point, is to kind of condition you to being around it. So if you grow up, say, you know in the mountains, and you grew up as a kid seeing snakes, you've been around snakes, you've been around wildlife, it's not a big deal to see maybe a bear or whatever. And for someone who maybe is raised in the city, that stuff's freaking them out, because they're not conditioned for it. They didn't grow up around it, they're not used to it, and they don't know what the person who lives in the mountains knows, that they're probably more scared of you than you are of them,
Yeah.
right? And so it's kind of that comfort level, and everyone has a threshold, and I think a lot of it has to do with your level of exposure, and it could be other things. And I know, like, we'll get into a little bit some things that could be from childhood or things of that nature, things that trigger things. But sometimes they're just irrational fears. You just trip out because it's the fear of the unknown, right?
And I think that's a big one for a lot of people, is the fear of, no matter how big, how small, it may seem to us, it's a it could potentially be a really big thing for others. Um,
Hmm.
and so it just comes down to, like, maybe any threshold, um, that we have, in a sense, like, built up in our head, um, to how bad it's going to be. So going back to the whole thing of, the initial question, which would be, what I've,
What stops us from being courageous?
yeah. So the biggest thing, would be fear. Fear is the enemy of courage, but it's also the thing that makes courage possible in the first place. So even the courageous, and this is probably courage, and it doesn't even necessarily have to be the whole thing of a courageous person, but this just in general, like, everybody feels fear. But to make it more of a specific point, the courageous, the ones that we see, and they're like, and we might think, like, man, they're like super courageous or whatever the case may be, they still feel fear. So what sets them apart, is that they move past it. So a lot of times it comes down to, like, moving past a certain fear. Now, I'm not necessarily saying, like, if you're afraid of snakes, to go find a rattlesnake somewhere, and you're going to be like, I'm going to conquer this fear right now, and I'm going to grab that rattlesnake, because you're probably not a rattlesnake handler, I guess. So it could probably kill you.
Even
Um,
they get bit
yeah. So, and they probably
by
have a
being
bunch of,
by not respecting, something that should be respected, right? They get too comfortable.
but I,
So,
but I think the point would be, like, eventually that you move past it.
mhm,
It might take some time to move past it, but I feel like over time, um, that there can be a happy medium within your fears.
yeah,
So the key message here is logic can help you overcome your fears. So what is your
logic.
what is your definition of logic?
I think
What do you
it's
think logic
just. I think logic is just being rational, trying to be factual and objective in the way you look at a situation, and try to take the emotional thinking and the emotional reasoning out of it, because it's the emotions that blind us, especially when it comes to fear. That'll make you have some responses that wouldn't be normal. So to be logical is to look at a situation and break it down factually. And we're going to get into a story, right, that the book talks about. And um, the book, and in fact, Ryan Holiday, he talks about a lot of people from Greek history and Stoics and Athens, and for whatever reason, that's the genre he really likes, and it's all because I think basically he appreciates the philosophy of the Stoicism that helps people to be logical instead of emotional. But he tells a story um, about a guy named Pericles, right? And Pericles was, I guess, a statesman or whatever, and he was leading a bunch of troops, and they were really scared by a storm, right? And so the story goes is that um, the guys were freaking out. His troops were freaking out, and they didn't know how to respond. They thought maybe it was a bad moment, bad omen, or a sign of something bad was going to happen, right? And so Pericles, what he did was he grabbed two large rocks, right, and he banged them together. I guess in front of him, I don't have enough details, but basically he banged two rocks together and to make a point to say what was that. And he wanted, I guess basically his point was to let them know that it was a sound of two things hitting together, which they could see with their eyes, and it made a sound. And so they knew what it was. And basically, um, they didn't know, they didn't have the science or the background and kind of like the knowledge that we have now, right? They didn't have that scientific knowledge, so there's probably a lot of uh, beliefs, superstitions, or things that tied to gods, or just different beliefs that we would look at as silly today. But you think about it, if we didn't know all the things we know now through science and being able to break down weather and understand, oh, like this is winds and whatever, um, it's it's something that you can misinterpret, and you can start projecting onto it like this is what this means. Something bad is going to happen. So being logical, Pericles hit the stones together and just made a point. It's just noise.
Like, what
Nothing.
is this?
Yeah, it's noise. That's what it is. What are you experiencing? It's noise. Nothing more, nothing less. It's noise. And so basically, by pointing out the fact that it's noise and that's all it is, you didn't have to be afraid.
And I think we talked about this here in a little bit, but I think it has to do with like the instant close um example that he would give them, like, because if he tried to maybe try to well, he didn't even have the understanding in of a scientific mind or scientist or anything like that, but I'm guessing if he tried to explain it in such a way that sounded like, I don't know, scientific. I don't even know what that would sound like, but in order to sound like scientific, they might get lost. But if you have something like right in front of them, meaning the two rocks, hitting them together, it makes this noise that could potentially sound like thunder. It's easier for them to grasp onto that, to see something like right in front of your face rather than somebody trying to explain something to you, but they can't see it. So going with the whole thing of like thunder. So I've had
Maybe, made me think of ACDC. I'm like thunder.
thunderstruck. So like my big thing is like I used to, maybe I still am, I don't know. But so I would be afraid of the thunder. I wouldn't be afraid of the lightning, even though the lightning is the one that could actually kill me, not the sound of thunder. But for whatever reason, I remember me and a buddy, I don't know, we are probably 18, so like 30 something years ago. Like I remember like when thunder would come, like we're like scared. Lightning, like we could just watch the lightning, like, oh, well, there it is. And maybe it was because like even though we knew lightning is the one that could kill us, but we could see it far enough away where we're just kind of like, eh. But since the thunder was so loud and it came to us like so quick, that was a thing that was in a sense like more in front of us rather than like the thunder that was probably like, I don't know, 10, 15, 20 miles away,
Uh-huh.
which is weird because literally all that, well, I don't know the scientific reason behind it, but in a sense, literally all that thunder is sound.
Yeah.
I mean,
I mean, at the basic level, that's what it is. It's sound.
and that's the
So
thing that scared me.
yeah, definitely. You don't know what it is, right? And especially like if you get told crazy stuff as a kid, You know what I mean? But I mean, there's like other stuff that I've heard, like, God's moving furniture around. Like, don't worry, God's moving furniture around. Or like if it's raining, God's crying or
Yeah, yeah.
something like that. Little things like that that kids know. So, you know,
So, like Pericles, or what's his name?
I think it's Pericles.
Pericles. It is Pericles because you kind of made fun of me when I said Pericles. It was Hercules.
Pericles, Pericles.
Yeah. So, like Pericles, we should pro our fears. When we put our fears under the light of a logical, emotionless, and reasoning mind, many threats become less frightening. Irrational fears are like superstitious fears. So that's kind of going with having a having I a di- ugh, having an idea of something and taking our feeling out, um, with the whole like logical and reasoning mind.
Yeah.
And I do believe a lot of threats will become less frightening. Pretty much, it's almost like when you name it.
Hmm.
When you name it, it's makes it a little bit more or not obtainable, but less frightening. I would say. Um,
So, like, Winslow, do you know anyone who's like superstitious, or like, do you remember people being superstitious, like about like Friday the 13th, or like they have like these weird beliefs, you
uh,
know,
yeah,
like
I don't
walking
know.
under a ladder or a black cat or whatever, and it's like it means something, so something's gonna happen.
Yeah, like I don't know how deep it went for them. Like based on a scale
Whether
of like
they're
1 to 10,
truly superstitious, yeah.
like maybe it was like a 5 or something, 5 or 6. It was never, I don't think, like a full-fledged 10 to where it was like, "Oh my gosh, you just saw like a or we just saw like a black cat walk across the street as we're in this car right now, like something bad's gonna happen."
Oh my
It might
gosh, I
be
stepped on a crack. I broke my
yeah,
mama's back, right?
exactly. Like I think it was more so like they've been told that, so like the thought's there. But I think all it really was a thought. Like they don't really put too much
Stock into it.
weight, yeah, or stock into it. It was just kind of like, oh, well, I heard that before, and like, well, I'm not going to do it. Like, I'm not going to test it. But at the same time, if it does happen, it's not like now they're or like the whole thing of breaking a mirror or something like that. Like you lose 7 years or whatever the case may be.
Mhm.
Is that what it is? Lose
I
seven
don't know.
years.
Something along those. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's something like kind of superstitious-y.
Mhm.
But I don't think anybody that I've actually known have like been like downtrodden on like the whole a black cat crossing their path or like anything like that.
So do you think though, like there is a big gap between the type of thinking that is superstitious versus irrational fears? Because to me, it's almost like it's not the same thing, but it's the same type of mindset,
So maybe like indirectly the same
something like something like that.
because if it's the same mindset, then it would be the same
Just a
mindset,
different belief.
but it's like another branch that comes off of that mindset, I guess maybe.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So fear can be irrational because it is often based on incorrect or incomplete information. It can also be disproportionate
Disproportionate.
to the actual level of danger present in a given situation. My eyes, I guess, are a little old.
Okay, so break that down a little bit.
So fear can be irrational. Why can it be irrational? Because it's often based on incorrect or incomplete information. So, but yes, it is based on incomplete information, but in the sense that it's probably complete in somebody's mind, though, is where like an issue can come, I guess. Because if all you know is a snake bites or a spider bites, then I guess that's your fear. But at the same time, yes, it can be irrational. But to the person, it's perfectly rational. Like
Mhm.
they've thought of everything about it. Um, so yeah, so I think everything is on any given situation, and it could be something. And this is where I think we have to understand that perceiving or the perception of whatever variable it is, for us to not take it as what we perceive it as, but we always have to take it as what somebody else perceives it as. Even though like it might be something like super small, but to them it might be number 10 or something like that. To us, it might only be like a number two. Um, anything
Yeah,
that
like
you,
yeah, well, I'm thinking even like, like our kids or maybe when we were kids, if you were scared of the dark, or you're scared of, the boogeyman or whatever, maybe you've seen a scary movie or you got told some crazy, scary stories around, a fire, roasting marshmallows, whatever. And now your imagination's kicking into high gear. And it's like if you're a kid and you're afraid and you're knocking, on your mom's door, like, can I come in and sleep in the bed with you? Right. And like, why? And then dad gets up, it's like, what are you afraid of? There's nothing in there. Go back to bed. Right. Real simple, real logical for pops. Right. But for the kid, they're like, but I'm scared. Like, I'm freaked out. Like I heard a noise and like their imagination magnified it like a hundred degrees. And it just made it super intense, super emotional, and imagination is powerful. It's like have you ever watched a scary movie and all of a sudden it's like kind of left you with that eerie feeling, and then like you hear a noise in the house, like,
every little noise,
huh?
said every little noise you hear, it has to do with that story that you just heard or that story that you just saw on TV.
Yeah, like making sure that your gun safe is open and you're ready.
Something. So unexamined fears can scare you more than they should, but they lose power when you explore them and break them down. So an example. So an example is would be or would be when someone is afraid of dying in a plane crash. But the statistics show that flying is much safer than driving a car. Their fear of flying would be considered irrational. I do have that fear of flying. Um, but my fear of flying. So a lot of times I take things as yes, if it's only a 0.01% chance that something bad can happen. When it comes down to just me, I think the fear is more heavier than if it comes down to my loved ones. Flying, for instance. So I've been on a plane before. I flew. There was uh, my daughter was there, and so I think my big thing was if something were to happen, then my daughter will be there, and I don't want that. Now, if it was me, on the other hand, just by myself, I think it wouldn't be like as high as a number on the scale because like the fear of flying is still the fear of flying, but I think I have levels to it. Um, so in my head, it's not necessarily irrational in the sense of I'm protecting. I guess it is irrational, but in my head, it's not irrational in the sense of I'm protecting my family, even though there's only that 0.01% of something happening. Because I hear that all the time. Like, uh, flying is much safer than driving a car, and it's probably more expensive than driving a car. Just saying.
Yeah,
So that's why I choose not to fly because it's cheaper if I drive.
if you say so.
It's
I've never flown before, but like I have no fear of flying. Like I want to fly. And so it's just one of those things where I'm not, for whatever reason, I'm not afraid of flying. Like if it's gonna go down, and like it's, I guess my attitude is if it's my time, it's my time. And I don't like living afraid. I think that's something that's just deep inside of me. I hate living afraid.
Mm.
And especially if the things that I want to do in my life, require me, like, this is the way it has to be. Like, if I want to travel the world, then I'm gonna have to hop on a plane. And I want to travel the world. So, like, to me, it's just I'm gonna hop on a plane. Um, so I don't have any fears, but I can see. I think it's the way I think about it, it's an issue of control. Um, even though you may say, hey, statistically, it's safer to get on a plane than to drive. Okay. Okay, that makes sense. You gave me numbers, but I feel safer driving because I do it all the time and I'm around other people driving all the time. I grew up around cars all the time, and airplanes just seem different. And I don't have a lot of experience with airplanes, right? So, therefore, I'd rather stay in a place that's more comfortable for me and something I feel that's more controlled.
I think
Especially if,
that's what the big part is the control.
yeah. And it's
Because
like if I could point to 100 times I've been in a car and nothing's happened, and in fact I can connect being in a car with good times and music and it's relaxing or whatever the case may be. Um, I can have good things built in my mind, even though factually you're actually more at risk of something happening to you than if you were in a plane.
that's
Facts are our
crazy.
friends, but emotions rule,
Sometimes.
right? I mean, that's why, like, even
Sometimes
like in
it's true.
sales, they don't sell to logic; they sell to emotions because they know that we're emotional
Yeah.
creatures. As much as we like to think we're rational, we're not. We're very emotional creatures.
And a lot of times I do wish I could take out my emotions. And I feel like I do a decent job. But I do know that there's certain circumstances that I don't, in a sense, I will still let my feelings run my thought process, which isn't good, but I I I do know that. So I guess knowing at least is half the battle. And
Yeah.
one of the big things is vagueness amplifies fear. So I think that, or you want to take these next ones?
Yeah. So, like I said, vagueness amplifies fear. So if you can't identify it, right? Say like we're talking about the hearing, the bump in the night, and your imagination's a little hyper because you had too much candy and soda while you're watching a scary movie, and now you're left in this eerie feeling, and you hear a bump in the night, and so you don't know what it is, so it's vague. You're triggered by the emotion, and you're not stopping to think literally what was that. Like, let me identify what it was. So instead of doing the detective work of defining what it was, you leave it in this place where it feels big, it feels scary or whatever, right? And so right here it says, under the influence of fear, your mind magnifies threats and dangers, and it exaggerates, misleads, and construes. And so basically, these feelings tell you a lie because they're not connected to reality. Um, could they be? Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess technically, could is a big word. That once you start getting into your imagination, the whole world opens up, and because you start, the word imagination, you start imaging things in your mind, and once you have a picture, it's like the picture is worth 1,000 words, and so you have these pictures flashing in your mind. They produce a lot of feelings, and if you don't basically bring those feelings into uh, basically under your control and get logical, then you're going to be left just held hostage by your emotions, and that's no fun.
And I think a lot of times, especially if you're an overthinker, I think what happens is it runs wild. It just keeps going and going and going and going and going. Like, I mean, eventually it'll stop. But probably by that point, like, you're probably already thinking like a million like bad things that small little noise was. even though it was probably just maybe the wind and it hit something and just fell or whatever the case may be. But like in our minds, especially like being amped up on candy and sugary treats, like you're just going to like take that and just I'm just gonna run with it and I'm gonna let this fear like overtake me,
Too much
which
Starbucks.
definitely isn't a good thing.
Carrying a little nervous energy with you, right?
Good old caffeine.
So then it says, don't look away from the things that scare you. That'll just make them seem even more threatening. And so it's kind of like I know that as a kid I've been like scared. I don't know why I keep using the kid one in the scared of the dark, but that's where it's at. So it's like being scared as a kid. I remember I would just put the blanket over my head and I would just like hold it and it's like and just like close my eyes and just like wait for it to pass, like the feeling of being afraid. Why? I don't know. Why didn't I didn't want to know what was on the other side of if I took the sheet off and looked, you know. So
Maybe
it's
like it was gonna be kind of like the swaddling effect, like when you're little, like when you get swaddled in a blanket and then all of a sudden you feel comfortable. So that
yeah,
was the
maybe,
blanket going over your head. Even though
maybe.
like if something was gonna happen, it's probably gonna happen. Like it's not
Yeah,
like they're
like
gonna be in
if
the
a
room and be
boogeyman
like,
was
"Oh, it's not there."
yeah, if a boogeyman or someone broke in your house, you know what I mean? It's like if they're in there, you putting a blanket over your head, and it's like an ostrich or whatever, the ostrich who buries his head in the sand. We bury our head in the sand thinking it makes us feel safer. It's kind of like putting your fingers in your ears and closing your eyes and going la 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 la. I can't hear you, can't see you, la 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 la. And it's like that's not changing reality. You're just trying to hide from reality.
And I think that a lot of times it comes down to putting yourself in a box, because if you put yourself in this box, like the the what is it, the what puts its head on the ground.
Ostrich.
Yeah. So an
Yeah,
ostrich putting its head on the ground, or us doing
I think
this,
so.
like it's closing off a box, like in our mind, like, or with the ostrich just closing off the box in his mind, like, okay, so this is all I have to worry about. So now, like, I know I'm safe. And so once you put yourself in this confinement of whatever the case may be, like it makes you feel safe, even though like logically, well, I guess you in a sense you're thinking you're using logic, but all you're doing is like I'm going to confine myself, because if I confine my thoughts, then it's going to stop me from thinking of everything else um that it's going to be.
Yeah, and it kind of leads us right into this next section where it talks about it can be difficult for logic to overcome fear, because fear activates the flight or flight response, which is designed to protect us in dangerous situations. And so our brain chemistry changes, right? And so fight or flight is, when you get scared, you're either going to run from the situation for survival, or you get that feeling of being backed into a corner. You're throwing up
Absolutely.
your hands, right? And you're ready to go get it. And it's like me, for example. There's a my sister-in-law knows this. If I get scared, if you startle me, and I don't know why I'm
You try
so
to punch
jumpy.
somebody.
Yes, and people who know me well, that if you
Yep.
startle me or you pop out of a corner and go boo, I'm gonna
Miss
swing on you.
Flores. Miss
Right?
Flores.
I will swing on you, and it's just habit. And twice. And this happens to be my sister-in-law and her daughter. And I felt the first one, my sister-in-law, we used to live in a place and they had a curtain for a door. And so I came in from work and I'm going into the kitchen and I go to move the curtain. She's waiting there and she thinks it's hilarious. And she waits for me to hit the curtain. She goes, boo. And I go, whoo. And barely tipped her nose, barely, because she knew to back up. Right now, fast forward, her daughter, is a teenager, and I'm getting some coffee in the morning, like early in the morning, and she's a teenager. And she says like summertime, so she stayed up all night. She was on her phone, TikTok, whatever, and she came up, she came up behind me and went boo, and I turned around and and I hit her, not super hard, but enough because she backed up. But and plus, like I like in mid swing, like I realized like it's her, But I kind of got her a little bit, and she just stared there and looked at me and was like, well, like you guys already know.
And it's one of those things like what you perceive as a threat, like they perceive it as like, oh, I'm just joking. But that's when it all comes down to like what we perceive it as.
Yep,
And if the person that perceives it as maybe in a sense a threat, they're going to swing. Now the other person might just perceive it as like, oh well, I'm just being funny. Well, that's probably one of those things that you might not want to do. Um,
not for someone who swings.
no, definitely not. I mean, unless you're super quick at doing a couple of uh, good with your head movement and bobbing and weaving and stuff like that,
Yeah,
then you might
better.
want you might want to stop that.
Yeah.
So fears often have a story or experience associated with them. Many of our fears are learned through our experiences, especially during childhood. So is one of yours experienced through childhood or some experience or in general, or is that associated with something?
What, the swinging at people?
Yep.
Mm, you know what? I don't know what that's from. I really don't. I don't know if I just got like a chihuahua spirit and I'm just kind of like shaking and like and I'm ready to snap at anything, biting out at gnats or whatever. But I don't know. I don't know where that comes from. I'm just always been hyper vigilant. Like even like in rooms, it's probably things that have happened in my life. But I can't pinpoint it to anything specifically. But I even if I sit in a room, I need to see the whole room. My wife knows. Like if we go in a restaurant, I need to see the door. I need to be able to kind of scan the room, and it's annoying to her because I can't help it in a public place. I'm paying attention to everything. I'm like hyper vigilant. And so sometimes I've gotten a lot better at it, but it would, make the experience of us having lunch or whatever not always be the best because she would see my eyes looking around.
You're
It's just
focused on
because,
everything else.
yeah, I'm focused on everything else. And so I've gotten a lot better at it, but it's still very much in me. I'm paying attention to everything. And I guess ultimately I guess maybe deep down inside, I know that we don't live in a safe world. And I've seen enough bad things happen. I've heard of enough bad things happening. And I've been a crazy person myself. And I've been around a lot of crazy people. So I don't live under um, I guess, under the belief that we live in a safe world so I can relax.
And I think the
So,
big thing for me too would be like, um, I don't want to be that person to be like, oh, well, I should have saw that. Like, I don't
mhm.
ever want to be that person. Like, if something bad were to happen, I don't want to be like, oh, well, I should have saw that.
Yeah, I never want to
Even-
get caught slipping.
Nope. And in the world that we live in, like, not saying that it's necessarily going to happen, but I think that's why we're hyper vigilant in our surroundings and our awareness of every little thing um, that we see as a I don't want to well I'll just say it like this as a possible threat. Like
Yeah.
I'm going to protect me and my family, and if that's what it takes, then that's what it's going to take.
It makes me think of my mom sent me a little TikTok today, and it was basically talking about someone who grew up loved well, and they didn't have to grow up with the survival mentality that they can be like empathetic and try to understand others who have grown up in a state of survival, and so they think in terms of survival and getting what they need and that total mindset that they carry, that someone who grew up like basically not having to worry about stuff because they grew up maybe being loved appropriately, having everything that they needed, that they can't truly understand.
No,
They can try to understand where you're coming from, but they don't know what it's like because they didn't have to live in survival. And so it just made me think, and they're talking about how it's like a lens. And like once you learn to live in survival, that it's like glasses, and so you learn to look through these glasses at everything that way. And I think that's the same thing that comes like from trauma and things of that nature, bad experiences that help make these fears um, like realities to you. So it's like for myself, because of my previous lifestyle, um, I've done some. I know what my mindset was like. I know the people, that um, you go up and down the street, or the city I live in, and I could look at a bunch of people and it's like they are oblivious to the fact of the type of people that are around them. And they don't know, like, they could be a sitting duck. Like, there's people who are very not cool. They're not safe. They're not, you know, normal, because they're not thinking of being a safe, productive, pro-social citizen, and there are people who have criminal mindsets, or people on drugs, or people who have mental health issues. And so it can produce a lot of, people who have behaviors that you need to have a heightened alertness. And so, yeah, I always look at people who haven't experienced things. I can see, sometimes all I see is vulnerabilities. And it's like, I hope and pray, that nothing bad ever does happen to you. It's good that it's almost like that ignorance is bliss.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? Where it's like, you can just be happy, not worry about anything. And I'm looking at all the different things, right? Um,
47 different ways.
yeah, bingo.
So, writer and entrepreneur Tim Ferriss recommends a process called fear setting, which involves examining and articulating the fears that restrain us in life. So, the process of fear setting involves 3 steps. The first step is identifying the fear or concern. Number 2 is determining the worst case scenario and how to prevent it or mitigate its impact. And number 3 is making a plan to move forward despite the fear or concern. Um, so, well, I think a big one is identifying it, making sure you know what it is, because if you can't identify it, then you can't, in a sense of what number 2 is talking about, like you can't determine the worst case scenario. And the only bad thing I could see with defining the worst case scenario is that you might be fixated on the worst case scenario, and by doing that, you might not be able to enjoy what's going on in the moment. Um, but I do believe that it is good to
But would you
kind of.
say if you're already afraid, that you're already kind of like paralyzed in a sense? So like this is talking about how to why you need to, determine what's the worst case scenario, right? What's the worst that can happen? It's because you are afraid.
So
So
to kind
I
of almost narrow it down,
yeah.
so it doesn't go into the 15th world of your brain.
Yes, I mean, like, for example, if say, you have to give a talk in front of, 200 people, right? And so, that's one of the number one fears is public speaking, right? And you're nervous, you're scared, and you prepared and prepared, but you're still very nervous, and you're like, having ready to have a meltdown. It's like at that point, you really need to say, what is the worst that can happen? What's truly the worst that can happen? Okay. I could, blow it. I could embarrass myself. I could get a bad case of, and get sick all of a sudden. Right. It's like the worst fear. Like you're going to get the poops or something,
That's what I thought you were going with.
you know, and, but it's like you play it out. It's like, it's, it can be very scary, but
It's probably
okay,
not as
then
bad.
then what? Yeah. What's the likelihood that that's gonna happen, you
And then
know?
you're making the plan to move forward despite the fear or concern,
Yep.
because I already identified it. So, like, if the worst thing is that people are going to laugh at me, like, okay, like, and like I've been laughed at like many of times. I'm not saying it's the
Mhm.
right thing or wrong thing or whatever the case may be, but like you'll move past that.
Yeah.
because fear setting is bringing the mind of the misfortunes that life could possibly bring your way. By familiarizing yourself with these fears, you lessen their ability to intimidate you. So it's almost like by naming the fear and knowing the fear, like it's not going to intimidate you as much. Like I do still feel like there's going to be some sort of intimidation, but I do believe by naming it and being more specific. So instead of it being so vague, it being more specific, it's going to narrow it down a little bit more. So I feel like you get more of a grasp. So it's more in front of you. Such like the whole thing of the what's his name? Pericles.
Paraguay.
Pericles. Such as Pericles, like trying to articulate and trying to explain to him like what lightning and thunder is or what thunder is. Well, all I'm gonna do is I'm gonna show you what it is. And now in a sense, it's like you're defining what it is and you're being specific about it, whether it was true or not, but you're being specific about it to make them like it's not so overwhelming for them. So it can't intimidate you as much, I would think. So fear setting exercises can be a useful tool for overcoming procrastination, overcoming self doubt, and achieving personal and professional goals. Um, and I think just exercises like in general, because the fear setting one seems like it's more of a mental thing, which I almost think at this point, well, I've thought of this for a while. Like, I think mental exercises are way more important than physical exercises in a sense. Because I feel like your mind is with you at all times. So your body can be tired and then you're just going to be like, but like your mind is going to be with you and probably until you fall asleep. Um, what's up?
No, I 100% understand what you're saying, and I as it's been lately that I have truly kind of moved away from thinking it's all the mind. And that's because I have to always keep my stress in check or my anxiety in check. It's just something that I wrestle with, right? So I know that now I'm more self-aware that I have to say, have I exercised? Have I exerted myself physically? Right? Have I made myself sweat? Have I done something? Right? Have I went and worked out in the garage or whatever? And
So as a
that
coping thing,
as a coping thing, but I know that physically when I exert myself, it's releasing different chemicals in my body, right? And so the anxiety and the stress comes down. And so really for you to have an improved mental state or mental health, you have to do something physically with your body. Or like some of the motivational speakers, whatever I heard, they'll what they do to like start their day or to they'll put themselves in ice cold water or take an ice cold shower because they want that
yeah, I've heard that.
shock. They want that shock, right? That physical shock that brings them to a state of alertness, right? And so it's amazing how much the mind and the body is connected. And so if you shock the body, the mind, wakes up too. So it's kind of a cycle,
So
and
so I
how you
guess
think about things matters too.
so I guess overall, like I do believe like it says here is like it is a useful tool for overcoming procrastination, overcoming self doubt, and achieving personal and professional goals. So I forgot who. Do you remember who stated this in the Blinkist? It was somebody that was talking about this. A blow that you're not prepared for hurts worst of all. When you anticipate can only do so much harm.
I think it was
Uh,
like Seneca or some like philosopher dude or
yeah,
something.
it was definitely a philosophy guy. And I agree with that to a point. Um, because I think if you anticipate it, it only hurts as much because it's not as much of a thing that just
Shock.
happened. Yeah, it takes out the shock of it. So I think with the shock, it automatically takes it to like a level 7. But if whatever situation happens, and you're kind of aware of it, then then it's like a level 3 or something like that.
Yeah.
So I think it does make it hurt a little bit less, I would say.
Yeah.
So one of the
I
examples.
think it gives you the illusion you're in control. Because a shock,
Yeah,
something that shocks you is it's that moment
I
you're
had no idea.
I had no idea, so you feel out of control in those few seconds or whatever, you're completely out of control of
Yeah,
what happened. Where
and
but if you know that it's gonna happen, then
you're almost controlling the situation, which does
at
always
least
come
it
back
feels that way.
down. Yeah, it seems like it always comes back down to the control of a
Yeah.
situation. So one of the things that John D. Rockefeller would do, but he would frequently tell himself, ask himself, suppose the fields gave out, like what would he do, since that was like a big part of his business and everything. Like what would he do? So he'd almost pose the question to himself before it pretty much happened. So
Yeah.
in other words, what will you do if the foundations of your business empire crumbled? Rockefeller kept himself alert and agile with this kind of thinking. So almost posing the question of the worst possible scenario, right?
Mhm.
Um, like so everything that you depended on, that you relied on, what if all that went away? Um, so a big part comes down to like stop magnifying your fears, like quit making them super big, get comfortable with them. And a lot of times how some people say that they're comfortable in the chaos. And that's kind of the thing that I kind of think of would be like being comfortable in the chaos. Like because you're getting comfortable in within any chaos that could be happening. Like so if the oil fields did dry up and the market crashed and all this other stuff, like Rockefeller was kind of like, okay, well, I already identified that. I already know what's going on. So now I'm going to take that next step, because he went through the whole thing of identifying it, the worst case scenario, and then, okay, well, this is the path that I will be taking.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes me think of, like, I don't know, it's a story I always think of, but basically it's like a bird, that it flew up to the tops of a high tree, and it sits on a branch and it rests its weight on the branch, and it's actually depending on the branch to hold it up. But so like Rockefeller, like, losing all his enterprise and everything he's worked for, it can crumble. And so that'd be like the branch getting chopped out from underneath you. But at the end of the day, it's like you had the wings to fly up there. So your dependence isn't truly in the branch you're sitting on. It's in your own wings because you can do it again. You can fly, right? And so it's like being able to trust in the fact that you can overcome it. You've done this before. You've done things similar before. So
So by acknowledging and confronting your fears, you can better understand them and develop strategies to overcome them. So it all goes back to what we're just talking about right now. It goes back to the three what steps principles on fear setting. So if you identify them, if you decide the worst case scenario, and you pretty much develop those strategies for you to overcome them, it will definitely make them a lot easier um, to go through it, I would say. So
for sure.
facing your fears can help you to become more resilient and able to tackle new challenges and opportunities with confidence, and basically stop robbing yourself of opportunities because you're scared. So I think the big thing is becoming more resilient, because once you, and how I see it is, once you face a fear, I think a fear is a fear is a fear is a fear. It's because what you perceive it as. So it could be something totally different, like facing your fear of being in the dark too long, facing your fear of a snake, facing your fear of public speaking, facing your fear of what was the other one that you said? Public speaking or flying in a plane. I think the more and more that you do it, or the more that and more that you face a fear of any kind, I do believe that it lessens and dampens the idea of a fear being a fear. Um, and it does help you to tackle like new challenges, because you're not going to like fear failure or fear anything else, because you've already done plenty of things in the past, and it almost like becomes a part of you, I guess. So what you think? What do you think?
I think just kind of some, maybe just as a final thought, is I think about I think control is an illusion ultimately. I mean, like, yeah, there's like little things you can control, but we don't control anything. And so a lot
Yeah.
of the fears have to do with, what's going to happen. Can I control, like death or really bad things happening or sicknesses or, just things in life. We try to control things. It's human nature. But at the end of the day, this is where like faith for a lot of people makes a big difference because you live in a place of surrender. It's not that you ignore responsibilities or you ignore things that could happen, but it's more of you know a mindset of I can surrender to the fact that I don't control, that my life is in God's hands, and I trust Him, and I'm not going to trip myself out. It's going to be all right no
Amen.
matter what because I trust in Him. So that's kind of what helps me.
So the last thing is I'm going to say something that kind of brings everything in a sense full circle. So what this book is about, it's for motivation, inspiration, and it's for personal development. So I feel a lot of times what keeps somebody from being courageous, or what keeps somebody from um, I guess climbing their personal development ladder, could be fear. And so the big reason why we bring a lot of these up that we're just talking about right now is to help you overcome your fear, to help you to be that courageous person in order to reach the next step into your personal growth, spiritual growth, whatever growth that you're looking for. Um, and I just hope that you almost in a sense like see fear as what it is. For you to identify it and for you to be able to think about the worst case scenario, no matter how bad the scenario may be, but think about it in a logical step, take your feelings out and go into the what 10,000 feet view and kind of see how everything works itself out. Because I do want you guys to be able to grow personally, spiritually, as an entrepreneurship, or as an entrepreneur, as an artist, whatever it is. I do want you to grow. And I know Carlos feels the same, that he wants you also to grow. And I feel like fear can be the step that is making it hard for you to go to the next step, because maybe the big thing would be like the fear of failure. Um, for me, when it comes down to the fear of failure, to me all failure is just another stepping stone for me. And I'm hoping that me, Carlos, within this podcast that we're doing right now, the creative whole, I'm hoping that we always look at the step that we are taking at the time, and not the step three, I don't know, three steps ahead, because a lot of times that could lead to like a fear. It could be a fear of nobody's listening to us, nobody's paying attention to what we're doing. But if we take that first initial step and we focus on that most important step, that we will continue to hopefully bring things out that maybe you haven't questioned yourself. And it always comes down to, if you ever have any questions, comments, concerns, feel free to reach out to us, drop us a comment. Hopefully you can subscribe, give us a like. So anytime that we do come out with a new episode, whether it's on these books, whether it's on practical Christianity, like last week, whatever it may be on, our main goal is to glorify God and to help you guys through whatever obstacle that is in your way. And hopefully we can be a part of your journey, just as you are a part of our journey.
Yeah, dude.
So with that being said, Thanks for joining us. Check us out on YouTube, Anchor, and Spotify. And like I've asked before, if it's not too big of a thing, drop us a 1-star, 5-star, 2-star, like it, subscribe it, thumbs up, thumbs down. All we ask is for you to be genuine. And what you say and what you do, just like we try to be genuine in everything that we say and that we do, because we do care about you. We do love you guys and we hope the best for you. And so we just want to be there for you. So this is Winslow. Actually, this is Winslow. That's Carlos. And
Me.
we are the Creative Whole. Thanks a lot for listening. We love you guys for listening. Thank you for checking us out.
Yeah.
And we hope you have a good night. Have a safe, blessed night. And peace.
Love you guys. Peace.
That's right.